Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. Today I have a special video for you. We're going to talk about my favorite retro handheld devices of 2022. Now, I made a very similar video to this last year. As you can imagine, it was my favorite devices of 2021, and I remember in that video saying that that was the year where handheld devices really blew up. But truth be told, I had no idea what we had in store for us in 2022 because it's gotten even bigger and crazier this year. The easiest example is going to be the Steam Deck. That's a device that came out earlier this year and has just taken the handheld world by storm. Additionally, other large companies have gotten involved in the whole handheld thing as well. For example, Logitech made their own streaming device. We'll talk more about that one later in the video. Now, the natural effect of having so much interest in an industry like this is that it gets really saturated with more and more devices. And so my hope in this video here is to help you kind of narrow down some of those choices to find the best fit for you. At the end of the day, this video is not about what is the ultimate or very best handheld device, because that means different things for different people. Instead, I've narrowed it down to several different categories, and hopefully one of those will match your needs. Anyway, I always love doing these videos, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. And so without any further delay, let's jump into it. Okay, we're going to start with the smallest and cheapest option and then work our way up from there. Our first category is going to be micro handhelds. These are the ones that are under $100 and usually will fit easily inside your pocket. And it's probably going to be no surprise to you here, but this year's winner is the Miyoo Mini. Now, technically, this device released in late 2021, but they had a revision early in 2022 that really made it worth having. As you can see, the Miyoo Mini is modeled after the original Game Boy. It even has the speaker placement in the same place. But it does have some updated concessions, like additional face buttons as well as some shoulders and triggers on the back. Now, it's common to see a lot of these micro handhelds every year, but it is very rare to see one that works so well. This one has truly excellent face buttons and a D-pad. They work really well. It also has a couple nice touches on it, like an old school volume wheel like on the old Game Boy. Now, the Miyoo Mini is currently available in 4 different colors, and these are them here. And I've done extensive videos about this product over the past year. I've probably done about a dozen videos at this point. Now, thanks to this device being so popular, there's a lot of community involvement, and that has resulted into a couple software images that are really great on this. One of those is called Onion, and we'll touch on that here in a second. In terms of what this device can play, it can basically play all of your 16-bit systems, so Super Nintendo and below, and it also does a pretty good job with PlayStation 1 as well. There's a handful of games that won't play at full speed, but those are few and far between. Ultimately, I think of this device as just a very pocketable version of playing Game Boy and Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and especially Game Boy Advance. It has a 4:3 aspect ratio screen with a 640x480 resolution. This looks absolutely stunning for the size. And some of the features of that Onion operating system I was talking about before are really handy. For example, you can power down the device in the middle of a game, and it's going to save your progress as you do that. Then when you power on your device, which is actually pretty fast, it's going to go right back to where you were in that same game. And so that makes this device very pick up and play friendly. Now, another handy feature of Onion OS is what they call the game switcher. Essentially what you do here is you press the menu button and it'll bring up a save state of all the games that you've been playing previously. And it even saves a screenshot of where you were in the game. And so you can toggle between these and then press the A button and jump right back into that same game at that exact same spot. And so let me show you a quick example here. So if you were playing through right here and you decided you wanted to try something else, you could tap that menu button, it'll bring up the game switcher, and then you can toggle to something else, press the A button, and you're instantly back into that other game. Frankly, there is no other device that is this convenient to just jump in and out of games, and I think because of that, plus its pocketability, this one is a win-win. Additionally, the device is so small that it works really well with one-handed gaming. Now, I wouldn't recommend that for Super Mario World, but it works really well with turn-based role-playing games. So you could play through some of your favorites on Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, or even PS1 right here. And when you combine that with the fact that this will boot up and shut down very quickly, and you can save your state every single time, this is the one to beat. In fact, the Miyoo Mini is the device I've been giving out to all of my friends and relatives. It's an amazing little device that's made even better by its price point, which is only $60. Anyway, when it comes to micro devices, the Miyoo Mini is my favorite of 2022. Now, another category that appeals to a lot of people are vertical handhelds. These are the handhelds that are shaped like the original Game Boy. In fact, the Miyoo Mini is a vertical handheld on its own. But for this category in particular, I wasn't looking at the micro consoles, but more like something you could use as your primary device. And so essentially this category is for people who want to play games but are especially nostalgic with that original Game Boy form factor. And this year we had an excellent candidate release. This one is called the Anbernic RG353V. And much like with the Miyoo Mini, this one has a 4:3 aspect ratio display, which is going to make it great for classic and retro games. On top of that, it has dual analog sticks. You're probably not going to use the right stick very much, but the left one's going to be great for arcade games. Also on the back, we have some shoulder and trigger buttons. These are a little bit bulkier than I would like, but all the same, they are very comfortable to use. And they're also a great place to rest your index fingers while playing. Up top, we have another feature that I really appreciate, which is an HDMI out port. That means you'll be able to plug this into a TV or monitor and play games on a big screen. Additionally, the device comes with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which means you could hook up external controllers and then play that on the TV that way as well. There's a couple different custom firmware options available, but I gotta say the stock firmware that comes with it isn't half bad either. However, lately I've been using this firmware here called ArcOS. It is really good when it comes to performance for particular systems like Dreamcast and Sega Saturn. And the nice thing about using one of these custom firmwares is that they are based on Emulation Station, which means you can use various themes to improve your navigation experience and just jump right in and out of your games. In terms of performance, this thing can play everything the Miyoo Mini can, which means all the way up to PS1, but then also about 3/4 of the catalog for certain systems too. Those systems include the Sega Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, and PSP. Now Anbernic, which is the company that made this device, is really well known for having excellent D-pad and face buttons. And so these have a nice classic retro feel. In fact, they feel a lot like using something like a Super Nintendo or an original NES controller. So as you can imagine, that combination of classic Game Boy form factor plus excellent D-pad and buttons gives you a very nostalgic experience. Now there are two different models of the RG353V. One is Linux only, and the other one can dual boot into Android. And I would recommend getting the higher end one because that one also comes with a touchscreen, which is going to be great for playing Nintendo DS games. Now another aspect I really like about the RG353 is this nice and compact size. It's not so small that I would want to slip it into my pocket, but all the same, it is nice and portable. And so if you want a vertical handheld that isn't quite as small as the Miyoo Mini, this is a really excellent choice. Now the next category is what I'm just calling a retro handheld, and this is my bread and butter here. The features I'm looking for here are a 4:3 aspect ratio screen, which is going to work really well for retro games, but then also something that is small and pocketable and comfortable to use as well. And this was probably the category I had the most trouble with when making a decision, but what I picked here is the Anbernic RG353M. Now essentially this is almost identical to the RG353V that we were just looking at, but with a horizontal form factor, and it's made out of aluminum as well. And this aluminum shell gives it a very premium experience. In fact, when you use the excellent D-pad and face buttons against a metal shell, it just has a much more sturdy feel to it. Additionally, this was the first budget handheld to come with Hall sensor analog sticks. What this means is you will never experience joystick drift with it, but also you have a wide range of control and it feels very nice and smooth. In terms of firmware, this can use everything that the RG353V can, so as you can see, I'm using the same ArcOS image right here. And compared to other metal devices that Anbernic has released in the past, this one is exceptionally thin. And that amount of slimness makes this one feel so pocketable and nice in the hand. Additionally, this one is feature-packed, so it has HDMI out as well, and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. This one has the same chipset as the 353V, so it can play all the same games that we were just talking about. But I have found the games I enjoy the most on this device are the ones that make use of an analog stick. Thanks to those upgraded joysticks, everything feels really rich and smooth. And I would say the cherry on the top is the upgraded speakers as well. This is one of the best sounding handhelds that are available at this price point. And so, in a way, the RG353M feels like a culmination of all the work that Anbernic has done over the past 2 or 3 years. Here we have a small, pocketable handheld that is just jam-packed with premium features, and it is also compatible with mature custom firmware as well, allowing us to do things like port over games like Shredder's Revenge. And so if you're looking for a compact and premium way to experience your favorite retro games, then I think the RG353M is the choice of the year. Okay, next category here is what I'm calling a value handheld. And what I mean by that is something that's not going to break the bank, so I want it to be under $200, but I'm also looking for a device that is very feature-rich and applicable in many different use cases. And so essentially I'm looking for a handheld that will provide me the most value for the money. And my personal winner here is the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. This one starts at $149 before shipping and taxes. Now this one hits all the points for me. For example, it has 8 different color options, including this transparent transparent blue option here, and it also has stacked shoulders and triggers, which means it's going to be great for both retro gaming and game streaming. Additionally, the chip that they're using in this one packs a lot of punch. It can play all the systems we were just talking about, but at an upgraded resolution. The 4.7-inch display on here has a resolution of 1334 by 750. And so as you can imagine, when you upscale a game to that resolution, it looks incredible. In fact, it's a lot like playing remastered versions of some of those old games. And so if you're looking for one of the best ways possible to play something like PSP, Nintendo 64, and Dreamcast, this is going to work really well. In particular, this is one of my favorite ways to play PSP this year. Now additionally, this device is so powerful that it can also play about half of the catalog for Nintendo GameCube and PS2. Now there are a couple tricks you'll have to do to get all these games working smoothly, and so I recommend checking out my review videos so you can get a better idea. But all the same, it is very exciting to have even a few of these games playable on something at this price. And so overall, when it comes to the most value for your money, I think the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus is the winner of the year. Now my next category is very specific, but I found this is probably one of the main questions that I've fielded all year long, and that is that everybody's looking for a handheld that can play all the GameCube and PS2 games that they want. And that might seem like an easy task, after all these systems are over 20 years old at this point. However, they are still pretty difficult to emulate in a handheld at a decent price. And my winner in this category is going to be the AYN Odin line of devices. I like to think of these as the older and beefier cousin of the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. In fact, they share many similar components. Now the Odins come with a 6-inch 1080p resolution display, and these come with some nice features like analog triggers, ergonomic grips, and some programmable back buttons. And it also comes with active cooling, which means you can really tax this CPU to get the best performance possible. Now, like with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, this is an Android-based device, and so essentially it's not that far from just having a phone with a controller attached. But like I've mentioned several times before, there's something magical about having something that is a dedicated handheld like this. Now the Odin devices have some pretty hefty chipsets inside. The Odin Lite has a Dimensity 900, whereas the base and Pro models have a Snapdragon 845 inside. And essentially what that means is you'll be able to play the vast majority of GameCube, PS2, and Nintendo Wii games, and for many of them you'll even be able to upscale the resolution to make them look even nicer on this 1080p display. Additionally, the base and Pro models can be configured so that they can dual boot into an ARM-based version of Windows as well. But for my own needs, I found that the Android side is a little bit more well-rounded. Another added bonus feature of the Odin is that it runs the Skyline or Nintendo Switch emulator really well. And so a lot of lightweight or indie titles for the Nintendo Switch, things like Celeste or SteamWorld Dig 2, work really well here on the Odin. But in the end, when it comes to this category alone, I would say that if you are looking for something to play PlayStation 2 and GameCube, then this is probably going to be your best bet. For under $300, you can get a device that can play all those classic systems absolutely no problem, but also works pretty well for game streaming and our coveted GameCube and PS2. I think we're going to have even more options in 2023, but for now, 2022 is the year of the Odin. Okay, my second to last category here is the one for streaming-based handhelds. And if you had asked me at the beginning of the year, I would not have expected to make a category for this at all. But I found that this idea here of a console companion, which will allow you to play your favorite Xbox or PlayStation games while in bed, is really a compelling idea. And for this category, I think the clear winner is the Logitech Cloud. This one gets things right in the places that matter the most. For example, it has a lovely, big, and saturated 7-inch 1080p display, and it also has some of the best ergonomics I've ever felt in a handheld. The grips on here are perfectly placed so that they are super comfortable, and it comes with analog triggers to boot. Now this device, like the other two we just looked at, is based on Android, and so you can play all those same emulators we were just talking about. In terms of raw performance, this lies somewhere between the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and the AYN Odin devices. And so essentially I would say that you can play about 75% of the GameCube catalog and maybe 60% of the PS2 games as well. And so while it may not be a powerhouse compared to something like the Odin, the larger display and really good controls do make it very excellent in that regard as well. But where the Logitech Cloud really shines is when it comes to game streaming. Specifically, I have found that streaming locally from my PlayStation 5 or my Xbox Series S onto this device is a complete delight. In fact, the controls and screen are so good that it doesn't feel like a step down when I go from playing on my console to something like this. And if you've ever tried game streaming yourself, you know that it is typically a compromised experience, but this one here is the closest to not being a compromise that I've ever found. And so if the idea of streaming your favorite console or even PC or cloud game on the couch or in bed appeals to you, then I do think it is worth taking a moment to consider the Logitech Cloud. However, this device isn't perfect and there are two caveats I want to bring up. Number one, I'm not a huge fan of the D-pad on this device, so if you want to play classic retro games or something that requires very precise controls with a D-pad, the Logitech Cloud is not a perfect fit. The other thing is the standard retail price. This thing is $350 when not on sale. And to me, that is just way too much money compared to the competition. Now, over this past Black Friday, the price dropped all the way down to $250. And honestly, I think that's a sweet spot. If you can find this device between $200 and $250, I think it's well worth it. But I would say that anything above that may not be worth your time. And so my recommendation with this device comes with a big asterisk to make sure that you find it on sale, but when you do pick it up, you're going to love it. Alright, and so our last category here is what I'm calling our one and done handheld. The idea behind this one is maybe you're not like me and totally obsessed with every single handheld that comes out. Instead of messing around with 20 different handhelds, you just want to get one, and you want that one to be very good for its price. And so I think with those things in mind, your choice for 2022 is of no surprise. It is the Valve Steam Deck. This one starts at $400 but can go all the way up to $650, and this thing is just a modern marvel. Before we even start talking about what it can do, let's talk about how it feels to actually play this device. Number one, hands down, this is the most comfortable and ergonomic device that has been released this year. Not only does it have almost console-like grips here on the back, but it also has all the bells and whistles that I would hope for in a handheld. Things like analog triggers that work especially well as a D-pad and face buttons and analog sticks that are all perfectly placed. And let's not forget the trackpads here, which also expand the usability by a bunch. Now, what makes the Steam Deck special from the others is that it's a handheld PC. And so as you watch me playing the PC version of God of War, keep in mind that this is playing on the device. We are not streaming this in any way. Now, there have been several different handheld PCs that have been released over the past year or two, but none of them can hold a candle to the price to performance that you can get from the Steam Deck. Now, there are some concessions to be made with the Steam Deck, and I go into those in detail with my other videos. Primarily, the compromises here are going to be in battery life. I would expect between 4 and 6 hours. And additionally, by virtue of having a Linux-based operating system, that means that some games will not be compatible. So, for example, if you wanted to play Destiny 2 or Call of Duty, you would actually have to install Windows on this machine instead of the custom operating system that comes with it. Either way, for the starting price of $400 alone, the amount of PC games that you can play and play well on the Steam Deck is just staggering. But that's not the only thing that the Steam Deck can do. For example, this is also an emulation powerhouse. There are some wonderful tools out there like EmuDeck, which I've made previous guides on, which will set everything up for you so that you can start playing your retro games immediately. And so of course it can play all those retro consoles no problem, like Super Nintendo right here. And because it has a slightly taller 16:10 aspect ratio, that means that 4:3 content like this are going to look nice and big on the display. And beyond all of your typical 16-bit systems, and even the harder ones like PSP and GameCube and PS2, this one can keep going. And so you'll be able to reliably emulate systems like 3DS and Nintendo Wii U, as well as Switch games too. And so this is exactly what I mean by a one-and-done handheld. Not only will you be able to emulate basically every system under the sun, but you'll also be able to carve out a huge amount of your Steam catalog as well. And so if I only had one desert island handheld, it would be the Steam Deck hands down. Alright, and so to summarize, here's a wrap up of all of the categories that we looked at and my winners on each. And honestly, just looking at this list right here as I'm talking, I'm just kind of amazed. It's really impressive that in 2022 alone, we've had 7 different handhelds released that are all worth picking up. And we're not even talking about all the other handhelds that I've also tested out that I thought were pretty good as well. In essence, these are the best of the best of 2022, and the fact that we have 7 of them says a lot. And it makes me even more excited for 2023. And so as we start wrapping up this video, as well as the year 2022, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, which one should I get? And so if none of those categories particularly stood out to you, then this is my advice here. If you have the money for it, I would say hands down, get the Steam Deck first. Of course, with a starting price of $400, it is not a cheap handheld. In fact, this is about the price of something like a PS5. But as you saw earlier, once you do pick this one up, you don't really have a need for the other ones after that. Now, if you're on a lighter budget, or you just don't want something quite as big as the Steam Deck, then my recommendation here would be the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. As I mentioned, I consider this to be the best value handheld of 2022. And so, for well under half the price of the Steam Deck, you can get something that's nice and ergonomic and fun to play, and it's going to be able to emulate all your favorite classic systems and even upscale some of those as well. And so that's really about it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below about what your favorite handheld device is of 2022. And if you're just now jumping into this community, I'd love to hear what you think is going to be your first purchase. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.